What's up, people? It's Mike back at Bird's Eye Bourbon. This short segment to this very long-ass video will function as the intro to my Sabbatical Distillery tour. I would have shot an intro in the car, but I was asleep. I'm kidding. I only sleep in my car when my wife's mad at me. Anyway, what's in the glass? Of course, it's a Sabbatical Bourbon. It's a pick from Central Cali Bourbon Barrel. Shout out to those guys. This one is a 6-year product. Checks in at 58.1 ABV. That's 116.2 proof. There, it's on the label. There is the age statement, 6 years. On the back label, it reads, here, if I may, no artificial flavors, coloring, or fillers. Well, ladies, sometimes we like that artificial filler, don't we? Yeah, of course. And it's distilled in North Carolina. I'll let you figure out where. Yeah. Cheers, y'all. Oh, that's a beautiful, luscious caramel note. And also like donut glaze. It's kind of sweet. Got a little bit of an oak backbone, not much. Not a whole lot of oak there. It's only a 6-year product. Maybe a fresh spice as well. Really good. As you can tell, I didn't like it too much. Stick around to the end of the video. I'll see y'all in a minute. I'll show you the haul. All right, we made it. There you go, y'all. We're going on a sabbatical. I need that break. Let's go. All right, people, we're here at Sabbatical. We made it. We were almost late. We're here with my man Fredo and Lilly. We just met. Fredo's a subscriber on YouTube, new friend. We gotta welcome drinks. Cheers. And we're gonna go on the tour. It's gonna start here in a minute. There's gonna be a total of 5 of us. So I'll chat back with y'all in a minute.
We're gonna be doing a fun tour today. It's only 5 of you, so it's gonna be a lot of fun. I'm gonna get you started, and then Danny's gonna come take over and talk a little bit more about the production aspect. I think they told you restrooms are that way, so if you use the restroom, it's that way. This is it. We're not gonna go very far, so we're gonna be in this space the whole time. We'll do a tasting at the end. Yeah, I'll walk you over and give you a little history of how we became Sabbatical. All right, so I know you're a big whiskey drinker.
A little bit, yeah.
You too? Getting there, yeah. You're obviously, you're about to go on a big Kentucky trip.
Oh, really? You guys going on the Bourbon Trail?
Yeah. Bourbon Trail, we're doing Bourbon on the Banks, kind of in the middle of it.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
She don't know yet, but we're doing that too.
We'll see you there then. It's in October.
Oh, eventually.
So a couple of things. One is you are actually on an island. So this is Victoria Island. So depending on which way you came, you crossed the bridge. So basically from the bridge this way all the way down to the bridge that way is a 7,000 acre farm. So one of the owners here, his name is Jack. He is 4th generation farmer, and his family owns all 7,000 acres. And then on that is Sabbatical, which is the distillery. So there's 2 owners, there's Jack and there's Danny. They both met in college, so they went to UC San Diego, and they became good friends. And just like anyone with young dreams, they dreamed of opening up a brewery one day. And so they talked about that. Well, they both graduated college. One of them went to Japan and the other one went to South America. So they were very far apart from each other, obviously not starting a brewery. And then while Jack was in Japan, his grandfather actually wrote him a letter and asked if he would consider to come back and take over the family farm. And so he took a sabbatical from work and came back, asked if he could open up a brewery. His grandfather said, it's your farm, you can do whatever you want. And so called his buddy Danny and said, hey, what do you think? And so Danny took a sabbatical from his job, and obviously the brewery plans didn't work out. It was a little competitive. They said, how about a distillery? And so they have a distillery, and they never left their sabbatical. So they're still here.
There you go.
Lucky for us, right?
Good. Welcome back. Can give you the background here. Made up some stories about us.
Your love story with Jack.
Yeah.
So what happened with the craft brew dream? It just kind of Crapoo's kind of trending down now, and whiskey and bourbon and tequila is trending up, right? Is that basically what happened?
That's what happened.
Yeah.
I don't know, a lot of things. It wasn't that we had talked about a lot of different things that we could do out here at some point. Beer was, craft brewing was one of them. But again, that was back before we knew anything about anything. So both went and lived real job lives and corporate lives and kind of didn't put it to the side and then started thinking about it again after, we had been ready to get out of that rat race and thought about the opportunity we had here. And then had just become, personally, I was just a fan of whiskey and craft spirits, and then looking at the market side of it, obviously, it kind of follows like 20 years behind what happened with craft beer. Craft beer became saturated, and we have a unique setup here where we can grow the grain for whiskey really well. We can grow barley for whiskey and be used for beer as well, but the hops are a little tricky because it's so windy out here. So there's also like agricultural aspects of it there.
Right.
But we were most interested in this by the time we got back to looking at doing something out here. But yeah,
Cool.
welcome out.
I'll turn it over to you
for a second time.
Production side. I'll see you later. In the
Yeah, you can give you a little bit of the background, but yeah, we're on Victoria Island, which is 7,000 acres, and it's pointed out Jackson over there somewhere. That's his family farm. The two of us started this distillery with, there was a lot of reasons why, but the whole concept of being able to grow as many of the ingredients here as possible, obviously very interesting, and then being able to do stuff like this where we felt like with beer and wine, there's a lot more opportunity to kind of understand how it's made and where it comes from, and when we were thinking about this, we didn't feel like there was a big connection outside of Kentucky or specific places where people really had that access point, so we liked this idea of it as well, and have been working on it for quite a while. We opened to the public 3.5 years ago, is when we first opened, and then started doing distribution after that, so now you can find us in bars, restaurants, all around the area here. But
You guys ever source? It takes a while to get product to market, right? I mean, you distill it and you age it at least 2 years, so.
yes, it's a tough part about whiskey, but no, but so when we started, we didn't source, but we worked with another distillery where the two of us and our founding distiller, Jake, we went to their facility before we had our permits here and did our recipe development, made our first batches and laid down barrels there. So that could start aging before we had our final permits that we could legally turn our stills on here. So kind of you could call it contract, but it was us making it at their facility because they had the permits.
Cool.
But yeah, so that was something that we didn't initially plan on doing because of what you said exactly, where you want to start a whiskey distillery, nothing actually happens for 3 years after you start, making stuff. But once we started getting held up, COVID hit at that time, and Jake knew the team over at, they're in North Carolina called Southern Distilling, but he knew them, and they had extra capacity on their stills, and said, yeah, you can come out, run our stills. The two of us came from totally different backgrounds. We were also learning from him at the time, so we could all go out there, learn how to do it, and get barrels aging before we had our permits, because COVID hit as we were waiting on our final county permits, San Joaquin County, and then they stopped all public hearings just because of COVID, so we couldn't get our last. So we had all of our equipment ready to go, but we legally could not turn them on until we got that lab. We had our federal and our state permits. So it ended up being a lot longer, so we were very happy that Jake talked us into making some of it and getting the aging started before we had them, because we thought it would give us a little head start. It ended up giving us 1.5-2 year start before we could actually run it here. So yeah, since then, no, but I mean, I'd be open to it. I think sourcing is, it's gone through a whole series of perceptions. I think initially it was a bad thing. Now it's, if you're open about it, you can make really good stuff. It's just consistency and, having the same sort of unique product gets tricky, but if you're doing blending, there's nothing wrong with it, but no, we haven't bought any barrels.
I mean, one of my favorite brands, they're an NDP, right? Old Carter.
I mean, there's a million.
Excuse me.
Now I think it's come back and people respect that there's a value there, but it's, before there were some distilleries who were seeming to be not honest about it. I think that's how it got a bad name about it, but truly, I mean, and we'll go through the whole process and, everything is a lot of work and it's complicated, but once you get the production part down, that's more routine, and the blending and the aging and the finishing, that's actually where challenging than the first part, you know. So if someone's just doing that, there's a lot of value there. I don't hold that against them. If they're just buying a barrel and selling it as is, then what's kind of the point there? But if you're picking certain barrels and, you know.
Yeah, you do a 20 barrel blending run, and that takes skill and experience.
It's truly a different thing than it was beforehand, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so anyway, have you guys done distillery tours before? Anybody?
Yeah, I've done a few.
Where at?
So I've done 13th Colony, and I've done Short Barrel in Norcross, Georgia. So I just got back from the southeast.
Okay.
And
I haven't been out there, but I like what they're doing for Short Barrel.
yeah, there's another NDP.
Yeah.
But you know, they got access to some great stuff, and that I don't know if have you tried the Bee's Knees? It's a honey finished whiskey. It's really good.
It's not too overpowering.
No, it's very subtle. It's not like the honey's not like a super dominant note.
Okay.
Yeah, Bee's Knees is great.
It's really good.
It's delicious.
Okay, so what we're gonna talk about a little bit here is we've got set up is just focusing more on our bourbon process, bourbon recipe. Obviously, we make all different kinds of whiskey. We make single malt whiskeys. We've got some wheated whiskeys in the barrels. We make gins, vodkas, brandy that we have a small batch of all on this equipment. But our primary product is our bourbon, and that's where we use corn that we grow here on our farm. So we're going to go through that process a little bit, and then if you have questions, keep jumping in. I'm not saying don't talk. I don't have a script. I've never had a script. If you guys are interested in something, we'll talk about it. If you already know it, just tell me. It doesn't matter.
So it's true. I know it's kind of a catchphrase now, but it's true grain to glass operation here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not 100% of our grain. You know, there's a lot of terms like small batch, for example. That doesn't actually mean anything.
Right. Yeah.
We are certainly small batch, but you know, grain to glass, yes. But so we grow all the corn for our whiskey here. Our barley we don't grow on the farm yet, but we've done a crop trial. That's gonna be our next thing that we plant. But our barley that we use for our bourbon is unsmoked. That's grown in California, just not right here on the island. And then in terms of our other products, we've got in your cocktail, that's the blueberry lemon vodka. That's made from blueberries that are grown directly behind, like out that back door, which we also host the blueberry you pick here in the summer, right here. So you can come out and pick your own blueberries. It's a whole different scene. You know, this parking lot's full, but it's all right here. So May to June, if you have time, it's come out. So those are from right here. A lot of the citrus we use in our non-whiskey spirits is grown here on the farm. So our whole concept was as many of the ingredients as possible grown right here and then keep adding over time. But when it comes to bourbon, which I'm sure you guys already know, I think everyone know the rules to call something a bourbon. America, majority corn, the rest of it can be whatever grains you want. And then a new barrel versus one that has something in it prior.
Yeah, it's got to be 2 years to be called it straight.
Straight is the 2 years and it has to be in a new barrel. So you can have a straight single malt, a straight rye, but yeah, that's just new barrel at least 2 years. But yeah, a lot of people think with bourbon, like, it has to be made in Kentucky or something. No, but it is the geographic trademark of just the U.S. You can't have a Canadian bourbon, but you can have a California bourbon. And in terms of the new American oak, yeah, that's just a rule. It doesn't necessarily mean good or bad. The first time you fill a barrel, you're going to get a lot more from that wood in terms of color and flavor. American oak as a species, the wood species itself has vanillins in that. So when you think about a bourbon having vanilla-like flavors, you really are picking up vanilla because there are vanillins from that wood that are transferred into the spirit. But it's sweeter, it's more flavor. If you think about scotches, for example, which are generally going to be single malts, they prefer used barrels because they don't want as much of that sweet oak flavor on it. We do both styles. Our blended whiskey that you'll try, which is a blend of our bourbon and a few of our single malts. Some of them are new barrels, some of them are once used barrels, just so we have different profiles to play with so we can get that end flavor that we wanted. So not good or bad, but if you want to call it a bourbon, it has to be a new barrel, which means if you're a producer that only makes bourbon, you get a new barrel, you fill it once, you can't use it again afterwards. So for us, we'll fill it once, then we'll use it for a different product afterwards. But there's a whole pipeline of, particularly the big, bourbon distilleries in Kentucky. They'll use the barrels for their bourbon, and when they're done, they'll send them to Scotland, where they will use them for the second time to age their scotch in. So they do find a use, but we like that we use them here to have different products over time. But yeah, so because corn is the majority grain in bourbon, going back to your grain to glass thing, that is our main grain we grow here on the island. And our standard bourbon mash bill, again, we make different types, it's a 2-grain bourbon, and it's about 80-20 ratio, so about 80% corn, 20% malted barley. And then we have other ones, like I said, we're going to be doing a rye soon, and we've done different ratios, but yeah, that's our core one, and that's what talk about kind of look at the batch system here because I'll walk over here. One, we have this very simplified infographic of sort of how the whole process works. Here's some of our corn that we've grown here on the farm. Here's some of that malted barley. You've probably seen corn and barley before, but the interesting thing is we're going to start with the whole grain spirits, and that's what you see back here, these big call them buckhorn bins there. So that's for grain storage. So we're going to have our grain weighed and stored in there as a whole grain, and then we're ready to do a batch. This is all scaled into a batch system where we're going to mill the grain first. So while it's a whole grain, when we store it before we need to cook it, we mill it, think of like a big coffee grinder that's just to grind it up to make the sugars more accessible in those grains. Which I should say, when we talk about the different categories, whiskey is any distilled spirit made from grain. So whiskey is your top level category. If grain is where your sugar starts or comes from, that's going to be whiskey. What type of whiskey it is depends on where you make it, how you make it, what grains you use, how long you age it, all that kind of thing. So everything we're talking about, they're all whiskey, but there's subcategories underneath this. Sometimes people ask, what's the difference between a bourbon and a whiskey? A bourbon is a whiskey, right? So the way that you kind of remember it is not all whiskey is bourbon, all bourbon is whiskey. Not all whiskey is a single malt, all single malt is whiskey. If you're going to start with fruit as your sugar source and then you ferment that and distill it, that will become a brandy. So the main brandies that we see are from grapes. It's wine that's distilled, but any fruit, if that's where you're going to be fermenting from, you distill that, it'll be a brandy.
So all the mash ingredients, they go in together all at once, or do you start cooking the corn first and then add the?
So in our batch system, we do a double distillation for our whiskey. Our larger scale is 2,000 liters, or about 528 gallons. So that's what we're going to be starting with in our cooker, which holds the same volume there. And what we're going to do is so that's our masher or our cooker. You hear all these terms that kind of apply to brewing and whiskey making. They all mean the same thing, it's just different conventions. So mash, the mash tun, doesn't matter. We're all talking about the same thing. What we're doing is we're trying, once we've milled it, so and that's what you see here is an example of our milled corn. So it's going to be more, like a coarse powder. Again, because what we care about here is making the sugars as easily digestible for the yeast that comes in the next stage of the process, so that we can start to create alcohol. So what we're going to do is, first we're going to fill this whole cooker with water. So again, we're almost full, but about 2,000 liters. And then we're going to add, once it's hot, almost to boiling, we do what we call a cook down process, to answer your question. And so we're going to first add the corn. The strike point for the corn is a higher temperature. That's where more of the enzymatic reactions happen that we're looking for, that are going to break down the more complex structures, the complex sugars, and the more simple sugars, smaller chain molecules. So then when the yeast gets in there, they can find them and digest them more easily. That temperature for the corn is higher than where a similar process is going to happen with the barley. So we're going to start at the hottest temperature. At the corn, for our batch size here, we're at about 710 pounds of corn will go in there. You can see we've got this chain disc system. So we're already pre-weighed it, we've milled it, and then when we're ready to go, we turn on the chain disc, it conveys across the top and drops into the cooker right there. And all of these, our masher and our stills, they all look pretty similar inside, but you can see here, we've got those stainless steel rods, those are the heating elements. And then there's an agitator in the middle, which keeps everything mixing. One, keeps the solution even, but it also, when you're talking about a grain-on distillation, which is what we do, it makes it so that we're not going to have corn getting stuck and burnt on the bottom or barley getting stuck and burnt. So it keeps it all even, it keeps the temperature consistent throughout. But yeah, so we're going to add the corn, and then we're going to slowly bring the temperature down. That's much smaller, but the coils you see in the back, those are connected to our chiller, so we can control where we keep it at the strike point for the corn. It all get added in, and then rest there for a while, and then we slowly bring the temperature down until we're ready for the barley. Barley's a lower percentage. We're at about 180 pounds of barley going in after that. Slowly bring it down from there until we're ready to be in a safe range to add the yeast is the next step. So that whole process of the cook it varies depending on how much we're using rest points, but it takes about 5 hours. And then when you come in and we're doing a cook, it's just going to smell like baking bread kind of, right? Because all we have is grains and water at that point. There's no alcohol yet. It's like a grain soup is in there. But once we're done with that, we're going to transfer it to one of these 4 stainless steel. The magic of the alcohol is going to be created. You've probably seen before, but I've got a little sample of some of our yeast. If you want, you can pass it around just because you can smell it. It doesn't smell good. That's the funny part. Those little things are what do all the work. So yeast is a living organism, right? What yeast is going to want to do, it's going to go in, look for sugars, eat them, and digest them. The byproduct of that fermentation, that digestion process, they're going to eat the sugars, and then they're going to produce a few things, CO2. So that's why all those tanks are vented, you see, because it's going to build up CO2 pressure. If they're closed still with a vent, but they've been closed for a little while during an active ferment, if you open that lid up, you have to make sure not to have your head over the side because you get a big waft of CO2 coming out. And they're going to create ethanol, which is what we want. That's the alcohol that we're looking for. And they're going to create heat because fermentation is an exothermic reaction. So as the yeast is working through that sugar and creating alcohol, it's also getting hotter and hotter and hotter. We need to make sure it doesn't get too hot because the yeast doesn't know its limits. It'll keep going and going until it gets so hot that it kills itself if you don't pay attention to it. Depending on the temperature outside and all, a lot of different factors. But that's why you see with those tanks, they're jacketed.
Is it a different yeast that I would use like to make sourdough?
Yeah, it is. I mean, a lot of those you can make whiskey with baker's yeast, or you could even use wine yeast or champagne yeast. They have different variations like that. They're all just kind of tailored for certain flavor profiles and certain yields, deficiency. So depending on the grain that you're starting with and what type of whiskey you're going to make, we spend a lot of time in the beginning working with a company that makes all different kinds of yeast, figuring out what's the one that works best for us. It can be different, in your based on your climate and all that kind of stuff. And then we use a few different kinds actually, depending on what we're going to be making. But
Yeah, because the yeast imparts a flavor, right?
it does. Yeah. It does. A lot of the esters that create flavor in the whiskey are formed as a result of what that yeast is doing, how it's doing that conversion. When I say efficiency or yield, I mean what's going to be best suited to ferment the sugars in this particular, whether it's a grain or a fruit or corn versus barley, that kind of thing. So it's not too dissimilar, but they are different, and then everyone has their own kind of take on what they think works best. You can also, like the way that we first discovered this whole process was there's wild yeast everywhere in the air, right? So people think that the way the first alcohol was made, like some honey got left in a cave somewhere, honey with water, and then wild yeast came in, cavemen, way back when came in, tried it, whoa, what's going on there? And then we slowly realized. So you can do you can ferment with natural yeast too, but it's less predictable. And if we're talking about here, there is yeast around. One of the reasons we have the lids is if there is wild yeast that gets in there, it may compete with the yeast that you have, and it may actually make it so that none of them are actually fermenting or having an accurate or a good fermentation process there. We call them jacketed fermenters, or those chemical jackets, because they're connected to our cooling lines. So we have temperature probes in our fermenters, depending on what we're making and the yeast we're using. We know the range of temperature we want to keep that at, to keep the yeast happy, to keep it active, and continuing to convert the sugars, but not get too hot. So if it starts to hit that upper limit that we've set, the temperature probe will send a message to our cooling, and it'll pump cold water around the outside. But with the jacket, it's not touching the product; it's just going around the outside of that tank, so we can keep it at a consistent temperature level. In the winter, we don't need to use as much of the cooling because the ambient air temperature is already doing that. In the summer, you have to kind of have the cooling going all the time. For us, then, when we start our fermentation, we have a pretty quick fermentation. It's about 3 days for us, where we've converted all of the sugars that are available into ethanol, and then we're ready to move to the next step after that, which still we keep all the grain on. Like I mentioned, we do grain on distillation. So when that's done, we've gone from a grain soup to about a 10% ABV beer or mash. Or, again, all mean the same thing, but 10% ABV, 20 proof, that's around, or 10 to 14% actually, depending, but yeah, minimum 10, more like 12%. But once that's done, we know, okay, we're ready. That's going to be all the sugar or all the alcohol we have to work with. So now the next step of distillation is beer. Beer, you're done. There, you add hops, you're done. With us, that's just the starting point. It is a beer. It's a beer that doesn't taste very good because we've designed it not for that step. Similar to, there are some distilled beers that are interesting, but most of them aren't great because they weren't designed for the distillation and the aging whiskey part. So we're going to transfer from one of the fermenters there to our larger 2,000 liter still here, which is we call our stripping run. So we're going to do a first distillation here just to separate out the alcohol. We're not going to be taking cuts on this distillation. we're not looking at the end profile of that whiskey, because with this product we're doing 2 distillations, so that comes in the second distillation, which is our finishing run or our spirit run, which is on our smaller still, exact same, they're just scaled, so 2,000 liters, we're going to run the distillation here just to boost up the ABV, and we get an end up here about 500 liters, which is the size of our smaller still, at about 30% ABV as a low wine, is what we call it at that stage. So we go with 10% ABV, we distill it. Just when we talk about distillation, it's really just taking advantage of chemical separation. We know that different elements, different molecules have different boiling points. So think about this still as like a big tea kettle, essentially. So we're going to have the mash in there. It's going to be mixing around. We have all the grain in there. We do it that way because we want to keep as much of the rich flavor from the grains as possible in the end product. Some people will lauter it or screen out the grain before this step, but we like having that richness from the grain flavor in our product. But it's all going to go in where we know that ethanol is going to evaporate or have a phase change, vaporize before water or the fatty acids or oils of the grains. So as we get it heated up and it gets hotter and hotter and hotter, eventually as we get that liquid, it turns into a steam or a gas. And so as it starts to vaporize, there's only one place for it to go. That's up the center of the column here. This one, we have 2 here. They're not filled with packing right now, but I have to show you what it looks like. But basically, it's just we know it can only go up from there. We're going to have reflux in there, so obstacles of that vapor to hit the top, to go from the bottom to the top. The reason you're going to have some obstacle is because you can get better separation. Perhaps some water molecules will have attached to an ethanol molecule, and they make their way up as a vapor. Package for these stills, these stainless steel coils, when we're going to be doing a gin or a vodka, we have the same ones made out of copper for a whiskey. But imagine that being all the way packed. The reflux is there, so it'll hit, it'll condense back down to the liquid, and then anything that's not what you're looking for at that temperature range will fall back down into the pot, and it'll have to reheat and vaporize to change it to make its way up the column. But as it works up as a steam, it's going up that column until it hits the top section, which is connected again to our cooling lines. And so once it gets to the very end, that's the green ones you see there, and the blue ones here, those are all for cooling. So the vapor will move up, but the very top section is just to stay cold, so that when the vapor hits that, it condenses to a liquid and it siphons off to the back. Where you see there's a secondary cooling section there, and then it's going to come down silicone collection hoses, and same as over there, collected in the tank, it's to become liquid again. But what we've done, because we're the only thing that's switched from a liquid to a gas in the pot, is the ethanol. We're leaving behind the parts that we don't want, and now we have higher concentration alcohol than what we've collected there, right? So stripping run, we're taking it all, even though some of that we don't want in our end product. We're just trying to boost it up so that we can then kind of perfect it, use our sensory analysis, get the end product on this one. But yeah, 30% ABV-ish at the end of that charges this still. So you can kind of think through on that. We went from 2,000 liters to 500 liters. And when we're going to end this distillation, what we're going to end up with is enough whiskey to fill one 53-gallon barrel, which is about 200. So there's a lot that's not making it through along the way as you're cleaning it and separating it.
This has an agitator just like the large one?
Yeah, it looks exactly
It's just, like you said earlier, it's just twin, but smaller.
Yeah, just scaled. Yeah, and the other unique thing about our system is, so we use electric stills here. So we have solar panels all on our building here and on our building next door. So we can run them off of our electric power here that we're getting from the solar energy. Most stills are going to be steam powered. They're going to require natural gas. We looked at both in the beginning. We wanted to go this direction for being able to use the solar and all different. We like the controls we have with the PLC. We can measure a lot of the different variables and have a better, more consistent scientific approach to it, as opposed to, well, if I have this dent in the still, it's going to taste that way later. I mean, that's how a lot of, if you think of the old school copper pot stills, some of those distilleries, if they replace it, they'll get a new one, and there was a dent that's been there for 50 years, and they'll make the same dent. I don't know why, but it made it taste the way that it tastes. It's a different story. We want to be able to control those things as we go. So they're unique in a few ways like that. But the other thing is, to get to the copper point, traditionally whiskey stills and brandy stills are going to be made out of copper. That's for a couple of reasons. One is that was generally a cheaper and more malleable metal to make things out of. But 2, copper does have a sulfur scrubbing property to it. So if you have run your fermentation and any sulfur compounds have formed there, you don't want them in your end product. So by contact with copper, it's going to remove any of that sulfur. But we achieve that in a different way, where this is sized for that column base. This is a copper mesh wafer, which sits at the base of the column of the still there. So again, there's a lot of liquid in the pot or the tank, but what we're going to end up with, we know, has to have passed through that column. So all of our end product will have passed through this copper mesh wafer. And the theoretical contact of the vapor through this wafer versus if the whole thing was made out of copper is actually greater than if you had made it that way. The other benefit is these being stainless steel, a lot more sanitary, a lot easier to clean. We can run different products and just clean in between.
Yeah, and
you don't have to clean the outside constantly like you do with the copper still with that patina and everything. So.
And it won't cost you $850,000.
Nothing's cheap and nothing's
right,
quick.
exactly. Yeah.
I wouldn't recommend starting this particular business if that's what you're asking.
Yeah.
It is fun and it's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, something from Vendome that size, what would it run? What do you think?
Well, I'm trying to, because when we went to Vendome, we met with them, we were looking at them. It depends, because Vendome makes different kind of stills. They're like standard pot with no column whatsoever, which is, limiting. You need just for the still, because you have to think, you also need, if you want to use steam, you need a boiler, you need gas, there's a lot of ancillary equipment that goes to it, but I'm trying to remember with them, this is a while ago. It might be a little less for that size, but then you're going to have to do a lot of add. If you want to have any control over it, that's an add-on, you know what I mean? You get your own PLC from somewhere else, which helps you better control and monitor things like the needle valve, like you're adjusting vapor speed, you're watching temperatures, like that's how we're paying attention and tracking what we're doing, and we're making adjustments. You're changing the temperature in the base and tracking the temperature at every part of the distillation. You're opening and closing the collection valve in different increments based on the product that you're going to make. You need some help controlling that if you want to be precise. Again, the sort of traditional still is just a gooseneck. You're not really doing much of any of that. You're just, here's what I get at the end of it, which is fine. It's its own thing, and we run some products more like that, but usually with those, then you're going to probably have to age it 10, 12, 15 years before it becomes interesting, because hasn't been cleaned. You haven't been perfected for the flavors that you want in the first part of the process.
Right.
But yeah, it's all, there's a lot of different ways to do it, but you don't also have to have 2 stills. We could use the same one and do it, it's the fun part, it's how you want to run your process, right? These we like because they're modular, so not only can we change the type of packing we're using in there, we can also add more sections of the column or take them off. Let's say we want to do, which we don't make this, but if we wanted to make just a pure, true vodka, then we would have as many column sections as possible, because what you want there is as much reflux as possible, because you want none of the flavors from anything.
You want to strip everything out.
The ethanol,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So when we're doing whiskey, we have this. Any packing that we're going to use is going to be copper. Then we solve that. Filter potential issues, and you'll see when we finish a distillation, these are going to be black essentially, because the sulfurs, any sulfuric elements are leached to it, and then we can, again, with these modular, take the column off, do a CIP for clean in place for everything that's here, but we can clean these in the ultrasonic cleaner, get them all fresh and brand new, and reuse them a bunch of times. But when we're on spirit run, the finishing run here, that's when we're looking for the elements of that end product that we want. That's what we're going to do, turn the heads, the hearts, and the tails. We're going to be taking cuts in that distillation process. So what that refers to, the very beginning part of that distillation, first thing that's going to happen is what we call the heads part of the run. So that's where, think of a distillation, you're always, you're starting from the lowest temperature to the highest. So 78.3 degrees Celsius is the boiling point of ethanol. So once we hit that point, that's where the first parts of this distillation are going to vaporize and rise up that column. But it's going to be really pure ethanol and actually a little bit of methanol, which has a lower boiling point. We don't want methanol. You do not want any of that in your end product. Very trace amounts, but it's going to be in every one of your batches. That's what we actually call the forge, the beginning of the head. Like that, set it aside. That's not going anywhere to the end product. That's going to be, we can use it for a cleaning solution. You can make hand sanitizer out of it. I've got a little ethanol fire pit at home. You can burn it. It's got some smell to it. But you don't want that in your end product. That's where you hear the horror stories of moonshiners, where they don't really take collections. There's a little methanol in there that'll make you go blind. Really.
Yeah, exactly.
It's wiggle, make you go blind if there's too much of it. There's not a lot, but you know, if someone's not taking any cuts, that's a problem. And then you move into the rest of the heads where it's not so much the methanol, but really intense ethanol. It's certain components within that ethanol that are going to be more of your like turpentine type nail polish remover at the really high levels concentration of those ethanol compounds. You don't want those either. That's our heads. That's what we're collecting. Still not going to put those in the end product. But as you get further through the heads and start to approach the hearts, which is where the good stuff is, then you have a decision to make, and depending on the product you're going to make, you may want a little bit of those heads. The heads tend to be lighter, fruitier flavors come in the heads component of the run. So depending on your end product, a little bit of that may blend in well with the rest of the run. That's where even once we've dialed in a recipe and we've got our settings, there's always something that's a little different. So we're still taking sensory analysis on, even though we know, okay, around here is where we're going to switch.
It's a baseline.
From there, yeah, exactly. We always check and then make a call. Okay, now once we feel comfortable and this is where really good flavor and still good alcohol is coming out, then we'll switch from smaller collection, bottles or whatever we're using here into the tank for the hearts. We know that's going to run for a good long while, and that's where most of the distillation time takes place. And we're always usually running called low and slow. So lower temperature at a slower rate ends up giving you a better product, gives you better separation, and allows you to have better control over what's coming through in that part of the distillation. Until we get towards the end of that heart, that's when we approach the tails, which is the last part of the run. Tails is when you're going to get, again, you're at the hottest point, so you're going to have to start to have different parts of that low line, in this case, that are going to be vaporizing. That's going to be more of the heavier, the acids, the oils from the grains. Some of that is good. Some of that's going to create good flavor. Too much of it, that's the type of alcohol you ever have, and you get the stomach hangover the next day. Good chance there's too much of the tails in it. If there's too much of the heads in it, not the methanol. Methanol, that you'll know, you're blind. Not too much of the heads. That's the type of thing that will give you a headache the next day. So if you ever had a part of your life like many of us did, and you tried some plastic bottle vodkas, a lot of heads probably in that end product there, because the more you can still sell it, it's liquid you can sell, but not going to be the best tasting, not going to make you feel the best. So if you're doing cleaner cuts, we call it, making sure you're really careful about what's included in the end product. Still doesn't mean that you have the best tasting spirit, but it's going to give you a better baseline, and then you have to do a lot of things to make sure you have it. So we'll, depending on our single malt, we might do a little more into those tails because we want more of those heavier flavors, but not too much. And as you keep going into the tails, you're also going to get burnt notes and off flavors that you don't want in your end product. So we'll call it at the end of that, end of the tails, when we decide there's no more good spirit coming out. We don't need to keep pulling from this. And then we're collected here, like I said, it's going to be higher ABV than our entry proof or barrel aging. We've done all different aging proofs, but we generally age our whiskey at about 55% ABV or 110 proof. So we're going to dilute it a little bit from our collection, put it in one of these American oak barrels, and then wait 6 years and hope that it's good at the end of it.
Now, how long does it take for the heart about?
So again, and that's different between the two stills, right? But so when we're doing a full run on the larger still, that can be up to 24 hours that we're running it. And this, depending on the product we're making also, the whole run, maybe 14 hours, the heart's 8 hours. The way we'll set it up is we can preheat these, right, to get to a certain temperature point where we're not distilling yet, but we can do that overnight slowly. So when we come in
in the morning, you have a 14-hour day maybe to babysit it.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, it's long, and that's a big part. Like I said, there's especially in the beginning, there's a lot of complexity that you're figuring out, and a lot of elements to make sure it's the best product possible. Once you're doing recipes that you already kind of know how it works, a lot of it's just facility management. Besides those cuts, like, okay, we got to make sure we're at the right time, we make these decisions to diagnose this, and talking 24-hour distillation, and all that stuff gets a little more complicated. So that's where a lot of your and that's where you can hear the term bonded or bottled and bond even.
Okay.
What that refers to is not necessarily that, but we're not paying, you're not paying taxes on the value of this until it moves out of your bonded facility. And so bonded is the government wants to know exactly how much potential taxes are you going to be giving them over time. And we just send reports every month and say, this much is still in a barrel, this much we bottled and went out the door, and they say, okay, give me the money on that. So you do have a lot of grains we're dealing with, mice and things like that, but that's not the value product. But when you're talking about whiskey or spirits versus even like a beer or wine, when you're at that high ABV, the nice part is it stays stable forever. So you don't have to worry about what's the temperature, for example, like you do with a wine or a beer. There's no bacteria that can grow at that level. So there's less challenges than a lot of these other commodities. I haven't found a resourceful rat that can get into the barrel and drink it yet, but I'm very resourceful. Yeah, there's all kinds of things that can happen. The other thing that'll happen, and then we go over there and start drinking. The other thing that always happens, you've heard of the term angel share? Washing machine.
Yeah.
The term angel share,
Yeah.
So that just refers to, we put something in a barrel, we know, no matter what, whatever the volume was that we filled it, so let's say 53 gallons to get it all the way full, or 200 liters to get it all the way full. As we age it, when we empty that barrel, it's going to be less than that. There's going to be evaporation over time. So we call that the angel share.
It's all humidity dependent, right?
Yeah, I mean, so no matter what, you're going to lose volume depending on where you're aging. You may end up with a higher proof spirit at the end of that aging, or a lower proof spirit. And that is based on the relative humidity and climate of the...
Drier humidity, usually higher ABV. Increased humidity, lower ABV, right?
Yeah, so no matter what, you're going to lose what you put in there. But where we are, we're on an island, but actually it's a pretty dry area, so we find we have a higher ABV after aging than we put it in. Because, the relative evaporation of ethanol water is different based on...
So you also find that with a lower entry proof, you get better flavor because you're adding water at the beginning as opposed to when you go to bottle?
I think so. I mean, so it's a whole philosophical, everyone's kind of got their own.
Michter's has that philosophy. Peerless also.
Peerless,
yeah.
The truth is I don't believe there's a yes or no answer there. I think it depends on what you're trying to make and, the style. But like if we're talking general, I think you end up going the highest entry proof, I don't think gives you the best whiskey. I think there's also, it's more like there's diminishing returns on what you're getting. It's better when you go lower on the entry proof, So some people, I think, will maybe just, it's a nice thing to talk about, but I don't know if it's that much different from this proof to that proof. So you just have to play around with it. It also depends on where you're aging it, what the whiskey is that you're making. But the concept you're talking about, I think, is generally true if you're not adding too much at the end. But, so everything we want to understand simply, but nothing's black and white like that.
Right.
Because there's nothing wrong with proofing your product and adding water. But what is important is when you're doing that, we practice what we call slow proofing or gradual reduction, which comes from the cognac tradition.
Correct. Nancy Fraley brought that to the States.
That's where I learned it. Yeah, I took a 3-day course with her when we were starting, and I bought in, and that's all we ever did.
Yeah, they do that at Still Austin.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, of course they do. They named it Still after her. So she's would you say legend? Yeah. Okay. So you guys know who she is. Yeah. Really, really.
The nose. Yeah.
She's awesome. She came from the cognac world, so very, very knowledgeable in things like aging and proofing, also blending. She's incredible. Yeah, I got to know her, and I learned a lot. And our distiller, Jake, who's the first distiller at Stranahan's, he had already been doing that as well, but kind of it all clicked, and we wouldn't even question it, because if you've ever have a chance to compare the exact same spirit that it has been proofed over, reduced over different amounts of time, they taste completely different. So when we are proofing down, we do the gradual reduction, in which case that argument about higher entry proof, lower entry proof isn't as strong at the end, because you kind of achieve the same thing by doing it over time.
Well, it makes sense if you think about it.
Yeah, because anytime you introduce water, oxygen, anything to your spirit, it's going to agitate it. It's going to make it a little sharper. You need time to have the different components to then find their new bonds and be able to oxidize and kind of air out. So theoretically, the longer you can spread that out, the better. But not everyone can do what she recommends, which is, in cognac, they'll proof over 50 years. Okay, well, I don't know. Let's find something.
Yeah.
Kids don't want to do this. But spreading over 1 week versus 1 day, it's going to be better. Spreading over 1 month versus 1 week, it's going to be better. And then you find again where does that real difference point in that process mixed in with.
Yeah, no.
It's crazy if you do it too fast, probably.
It does, yeah. No, it's incredible. It's a world of difference. And when we first started selling whiskey, which we didn't know, like what's the age statement that we're going to be ready ready to start bottling and selling this. We were just testing it, and once we felt like this was good and we were proud of it, we would do our first releases, but it would only be certain styles a little bit younger, and then later we would have released other styles. But when we first bottled it, about 3 years, 2.5, 3 years even, a lot of people would say this tastes a lot like, I can't believe this is only aged this long. And I credit that as a big part of why it comes across as a more mature whiskey. There's other, there's certain things you can't achieve outside of being aged in a barrel, but that it makes a really big difference. That I think now, a lot of people know about that, but historically, I think a lot of whiskey that you had was just sufficiency, right? It's at this proof, I want it to be at that proof. There it is, let's go. But you lose a lot in that and doing it that way. I'm ready to start tasting and then we can keep going.
Cool.
Sure.
Yep.
We'll get there. We just started drinking. Give us a second.
Yeah.
Maybe you did. No.
Welcome to the fun part of the tour where we get to taste everything that you just learned about from Danny. So I'll walk you through what your setup is in front of you. So first is you have a glass that just has water in it. We make those glasses out of our bottles, so it's recycled rocks glass. So if you buy something, you return the bottle, you get $2 per bottle, and they eventually turn into glasses. The silver cup is going to be your dump cup. So if you want to dump something out or spit it out, that's totally fine. You will not offend us here. When we are tasting through different proofs and things like that, we're usually doing that in the morning, and we use those cups a lot, otherwise we don't get much done the rest of the day. And then you also have water with a dropper, so you can add a little bit of water to your whiskey if you like. I'm going to encourage you to do that when we get to the bourbon because it does make a difference and changes the way it tastes. And then the green coffee mug is going to be pistachio samples. So if you want to help yourself to some pistachios, that's what's in that green mug. And then last is going to be, there is a little piece of glass that's on top of your Glencairn glass. You do have to remove that glass before you drink, otherwise it will fall off. I don't know why I have to tell people that, but it happens every time. So that being said, let's go ahead and start with number 1, which is going to be 80 proof. And this is going to be our blended American whiskey. So some fun things. Nosing, I want you just to smell it a lot before you take a sip of it. Quick little thing is I like to smell myself to reset my nose. So if you want to kind of reset your nose, just give yourself a smell. Go right back to it. I promise you it'll completely reset everything. It makes a big difference. Essentially, we're making 5 different types of whiskeys here. We're making 3 single malts, a cherry smoked, a peated, and a toasted. We also make a bourbon, and then we take that bourbon barrel after we dump it, and we refill it with that same bourbon mash bill. And so because we're doing that, it can't be called bourbon, so it's an American whiskey. So all 5 of those whiskeys are going to go into the blend of this bottle, and we proof this down to 80 proof. This is the lowest proof of all the whiskeys that you'll be trying today. This one, double gold at San Francisco Spirits this year, so a little over 30,000 global entries, and we were on that machine, double gold. So we're pretty proud of it, but feel free to give this one a taste. Should be nice and light, a little bit of sweetness up front, little tiny touch of smoke on the back end, but just overall, just very approachable for all whiskeys.
What's the mash bill in this guy?
So it's a blend. It's going to be a blend.
Okay.
So our mash bill for our bourbon is 80% corn, 20% malted barley. The single malts are 100% barley, right?
Yeah.
This one had a lot of the American whiskey in it. So it's like 5-year-old, like basically bourbon mash. It's the base of this one.
Yeah, that kind of noses like a boo, right? I'm getting like an herbal quality there. Yeah.
Yeah. It's actually modeled little insider secrets. So we modeled this one actually after a Japanese whiskey.
Okay. So closer to like a Scotch then, maybe.
Yeah. So Nickel Coffee whiskey, that's the Japanese whiskey that modeled that. And that has a lot of single malt. So the sweetness comes from the once used bourbon barrel, putting it in another bourbon.
Man, you put that note in my head, but it's there. There's a big coffee note in that.
Number 2 is going to be the one that says 100 proof on it. So this is going to be the highest proof of the whiskeys that you're drinking today. We barrel at 110. So you're not drinking too far off from the barrel proof, barrel strength that we're bottling at. This is 80% corn, 20% malted barley, 5.5 years old is what this is. So when you do nose this one, you should get a typical bourbon profile, like vanillas, caramels. And then after you take a sip of this one, or a couple of sips, I would encourage you to add a couple drops of water, just to see how it changes. We designed this one so if you wanted to drink it like on the rocks, or if you wanted to make cocktails that call for a bourbon, it dilutes nicely and brings out more sweetness and a little bit of a floral element.
All right, y'all.
Happy Van Winkle.
First
So
product.
Looking at 23 years.
It's American whiskey. It's a blend of bourbon and an American single malt. A lot of vanilla and coffee. Those are the two dominant notes. Really good. Lower proof, 80 proof.
Try to decide like where does it shine the most.
You're thinking of getting into whiskey here in the area, or if this is available in your market.
Does make a difference.
This is a great whiskey product to consider if you want to get into bourbons, blended American whiskey. Really good.
All right, so the two that you just had are part of our core.
All right, I'm a little bit behind here, the gluten, but it's okay. We'll take our time. Oh, that's good. Enjoying the straight bourbon. It's 100 proof, 5-year age statement. It's their barrel reserve product, orange label. I'm getting a little bit of oak there, beautiful caramel, nice red fruit as well. Cheers.
No pressure.
You guys know I'm a bourbon guy. It's my favorite so far. Which one's your favorite so far? Which one?
Three?
Oh, that's the American whiskey, huh?
No. How about you?
I like the bourbon so far. I haven't tried number 3 yet.
Oh, okay. I'm fast.
I'm a slow drinker, man. I could pour like an ounce and sit for an hour with it, you know what I mean? Because I'm usually just nosing it. I like to nose whiskey. Yeah.
Okay, so you're drinking the whole thing.
Oh, yeah. I don't like wasting it. You know, it doesn't matter what it is. I don't care if it's rice, mashed potato, whatever. I don't waste food. I don't waste anything. Unlike my wife. Hope she's not watching this. All right, so I went back to this while the gentleman was talking. There's a stone fruit note in here and a dark, rich sweetness and some complexity on the finish. Really good. Outstanding. And now I'm going to the cognac finished product. This one is 90 ABV. It's aged 5 years. 5 years of aging. Feel like my sweater. It lights up, man. I'll show you later. We're going to a bottle share afterwards. Okay, now I'm just drinking. So I didn't really analyze this one. But I'm not a cognac guy. I don't enjoy it. I know there are lots of people really like the Louis products, like Louis 13.
Yeah, how long did you leave yours out?
I'm not a cognac.
So I was lazy. Just don't
Number
put it in
4.
direct sunlight. So put it in a cup in the closet.
This one's finishing port cast. What kind of port? I don't know.
yeah.
Maybe tawny?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I didn't know that.
These tawny port casts, you guys finish these in?
So this particular one was tawny port cast and American port.
Wow,
So it's a
okay.
combination of both.
Cool. The tawny's my favorite.
Are you in a hurry today?
No, I'm not.
Okay.
Well, I'm going to a bottle share in Atwater, but yeah.
Cali group?
Yeah.
Okay.
Are you going?
What?
Are you going?
Nah, I'm working.
Oh, okay.
But if you stay, I can do some fun things for you.
Okay, cool. That'd be great.
So go ahead and taste the gin at your leisure as well. That's the one that has a G on there. I would say our gin is more.
Ooh, it's got a nice viscosity and richness. This is the, again, port cast finish. This guy's got a 5-year age statement. 732 bottle batch. There you go. The straight bourbon is still my favorite. That one was outstanding. Definitely gonna take a bottle of that tonight.
I don't want to drink it all, but
Drink's very different.
I can't drink right now, but it's good though. You can have it in the portion.
You definitely get the sweetness from the port. Yeah, this almost tastes like it's been rectified with a sweetening agent almost. Really good. And we know it's not. Of course not. That's the beauty of port finishing. That's what you hope to achieve when you use those types of barrels. Strawberries, a little bit of an orange note there, like a chocolate orange note. It's really nice.
And I think, like you said,
Drink neat. More of a sloppy drinker. Yeah, it's got a nice dark complexity. Obviously, you get the sweetness from the port finishing. It's nice.
I like it.
I don't know if I like that better than the bourbon, though. The bourbon's really good. It's outstanding.
And that's the tasting.
Thank you.
There's no rush. You guys take your time. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer questions.
So you guys, you working on any hazmat in here?
I mean, so we barrel most at 110, and it stays pretty close to that until about the 6-year mark, and then it jumps up by about 8 proof.
Yeah.
We just barreled this year some barrels at 120. Those vibes, I don't see anything getting 140 or above.
Yeah. Is it just the climate here? Because I'm thinking, sure it gets hot here during the summer.
It does, yeah. I mean, you got to start with a higher proof usually to get that up there. You get a lot of evaporation loss. We're not getting that much of a temperature difference. We don't get a lot of loss. So I would say we're probably only losing like 5% a year, right? So where some of those like hazmat barrels are like they're losing a lot.
Yeah.
Right? So
A lot more thermal expansion, right? Yeah. I can imagine. Yeah, most of the year, the whiskey's dormant quite a bit, right?
yeah,
Not a whole lot of movement.
This is it. So,
Yeah.
I mean, that's as high as the stack goes, and then we do rotate the stacks, so nothing's really staying at the top.
All right, so we're tasting some premium stuff here, not available to the public. There's no distribution on this. If you have a whiskey group and you want to do a pick here, you can get access to their barrel strength. So this is their barrel proof bourbon, a 6-year age statement. Beautiful black label.
Yes, with berries too, right? I like that.
This is the distiller's reserve version of their barrel proof bourbon.
Yes, it's the
Let me
best.
try
Well,
it.
we rode,
They also have it in Florida now, right?
on the extended evening hours. We did 3 times.
Oh my God. Ooh, that's got a nice spice to it on the mid palate. That's really nice.
I picked that.
That's velvety. That's chocolatey. Oh wow. Dark, rich caramel.
So you do have the things here, but your head's like a headache each side.
I think of like the darkest vanilla extract you've ever had too.
Jurassic Park one. the
Don't
new
mix those
Jurassic
glasses
Park.
up. Keep them in order.
So smooth
Okay.
and
I poured you
It wasn't open.
port finished bourbon at 3 different proofs.
They were putting that.
Okay. Thank you.
We're gonna go a year or 2 after every.
Jimmy Fallon one too.
It's so good. It's like so smooth. It's so.
It's like.
Okay, I'm gonna sit back down.
Magic Mountain.
Before I fall over.
I
Listen
should
to
go.
my label.
I don't know why I don't go. It's not that far. It's not.
You go to Discovery Key.
So member exclusive for this.
Here?
Yes.
Yes.
So this is
58 ABV.
When I went the other day, it was closed.
There's a little bit of cinnamon.
work friend
See,
at 6 Flags Over Georgia. With them and his son.
little cinnamon
And his son was going to
on the finish.
there. And we rode literally every roller coaster but one by
Oh, that's outstanding.
My friend Tom's like, yeah.
You can get access to that single barrel proof here at Sabbatical. You're in for a treat. It's really, really good.
Blew all my friends out of the water.
You're gonna.
And I'm getting a nice dark cherry note, dark fruit note. Delicious. Hey, I didn't say bye. My friends Fredo and Lilly. So I've been poured port finished whiskey here. 3 different strengths. The first one, I'd estimate, last one, so he didn't tell me what the proofs were. Estimating that to be about maybe 105? We'll see. See how good my palate is.
So there were 4 charges in California at 3 different places
Cheers.
for where we were in.
Yeah, their port's really good. It's probably my second favorite. That single barrel strength bourbon
So I
is
guess
really good.
the whole companies that own those Starbucks back there are actually based in California. What was else at Gundel? What was another place? Yeah, I'm like, well, I know these
God,
companies
that's
were
like-
there. And I'm like,
Syrupy and mouth coating.
yeah.
Viscous.
Gift card, so just like somebody
Thick. Really thick. This is glass 3.
What is our password? Sabbatical.
Oh, glass 3's got an amazing finish. Nice little proof tingle there at the end.
120, 24, just 24.
Got kind of a nice drying property. I'd estimate that guy maybe about maybe 120 proof. 105.
There's some hazies that
105 to
always have a seltzer.
110. Glass one. Whoa. Glass 3. I need some water.
On my way.
All right. Something's telling me. Look at the color on that. It's beautiful. Probably aged 5 years. Here, it's kind of a mild climate. We're on an island in the San Joaquin Delta.
Appreciate that.
She's not working today. It's like, okay. Just like,
But this, so
Oh
she
my God.
dropped all the way back to Oakley.
Whatever's in that, that's world class.
so, you know how many times I
I'd pay $200 for that, whatever that is. I'd pay $200 for a 375. That's wildly good, complex, well developed.
So you tell the guy walks in there.
It's a palate treat.
Yeah, he's shake that guy. You can't hit the ball in this here and shake that.
That's dark molasses, man. Wow, really, really, really good.
I had my Christmas party for school. And we do at one of the teachers' houses. And I'm like, you're going to take me, right?
Beautiful dark caramel.
Oakley Elementary. and
Oh, there's
Fredo
something
and
there I
Lilly
can't identify. That's, for me though, it's always been like the biggest challenge of nosing bourbon, tasting bourbon. There's just something there. I'm not quite sure what it is. You know, sometimes cinnamon can taste like a medicinal cherry or vice versa, right?
But I'm the first.
That's nuts. There's a touch of oak there on the finish. Glass 1 had the longest finish, and I'm going to be very embarrassed about that because it's probably the lowest proof. Maybe I have a little palate fatigue at this point, but what a treat. My battery's dying, y'all. I got to get out of here. I'm going to a bottle share Old Louisville release event for Bobby's Liquor, Central Cali Bourbon Barrel. Shout out to those guys. Shout out to the family over there. So I got about an hour drive. Don't worry, I'm fine. We got a pretty strong resistance to alcohol influence in my body. It's because I'm a real man, you know.
He does, works for
Look at that.
a company,
Wow.
Alpha and then
All right, y'all, I was way off. So, bottle 1, 44 ABV, which is 88 proof. Not even close. Glass 3, 49.5 ABV, which is 100 proof, right? And glass 4, which I called hot, it's 104. There you go. So don't believe anything I say. But then again, sometimes what you think is ethanol on the palate could be like rice spice or another type of spice. So give me a break. You gotta get out of here. Battery's dying. I'm gonna get my stuff and go. See y'all next time. Hey there, welcome to the end of the video. Did you watch the whole thing? Of course you did. If you're living life, you gotta enjoy the whole thing. I don't want half the thing, I want the whole thing, baby. Don't judge the haul. I know it's kind of small, but imagine a third bottle here. I got 2 of these. That's a port cast finished bourbon. It's tawny port and American port. It's aged 5 years, and the ABV is 47.5, which makes it, 95 proof. Yeah. What's the other bottle? This one is reserved for Sabbatical Club members. Of course, I got a bottle because I'm a VIP. This one is 58.35 proof. So what is that? 116.7. This one does not indicate distillation in the Carolinas. So, despite it being 6 years, like that one, these are both 6-year products carrying the Sabbatical label. That guy shows distillation in North Carolina. That guy does not. Anyway, I just thought that was an interesting bit to share. This is a single barrel select cast strength bourbon. I got to sample this. It's really great. They only gave me 1 bottle. I'll sit on it for a little while. So that's going to end the video, y'all. I got 3 bottles there. That guy. And 2 of these, I took one of these port cast finished bottles to a Central Cali Bourbon Barrel bottle share. And I left it with the host, who was very gracious. I'm going to go on a hunt here in a few days. I don't know, man. We're going to do some more whiskey reviews. I got a lot of whiskey to review. Hit me in the comments, y'all. Love you. See you next time. Cheers.